Let's stop and think, my people.
In the quiet town of Aquay, nestled between rolling hills and long rivers, people lived simple lives marked by farming, trading, and a deep devotion to God. The community was knitted together by faith. Church bells rang every Sunday, and nearly every home carried the fragrance of evening prayers. It was into this atmosphere of trust and longing for spiritual guidance that Pastor Jeremiah appeared. He was not originally from Aquay. Nobody truly knew his roots. He came into the town suddenly, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a commanding voice and piercing eyes that seemed to look into the soul of anyone who met him. He carried himself with the confidence of one who had seen visions and communed with God in secret places. When he first mounted the pulpit of a rented hall, people were drawn to him like bees to honey. He spoke with fiery passion, quoting scriptures with such speed and accuracy that the townsfolk were convinced he was divinely sent. But Pastor Jeremiah carried with him a heart darkened by greed and lust. He was a man who had studied not only the scriptures, but also the weaknesses of men and women. He knew that in a place where people longed for protection from evil, he could weave fear into their minds and present himself as their only shield. He had no true anointing. What he had was craftiness, cunning, and a fearless ability to manipulate. At first, his messages were harmless enough. He preached about faith, blessings, and prosperity. He told stories that made the poor dream of wealth and the barren dream of children. His words carried the sweetness of honey, and the people gave him offerings willingly. But soon Jeremiah introduced a darker tone to his sermons. He began to speak of curses, of ancient spirits that tormented families, of hidden forces that ruined lives. He told them that unless they came under his special covering, they would remain victims of evil powers. He would stand before the congregation, close his eyes tightly, and suddenly tremble as if under divine revelation. Then with a loud cry he would announce, "There is someone here. You are under the spell of witches in your family. Unless you receive special prayers, your life will be cut short." Fear gripped the people. Women wept. Men trembled. Mothers clutched their children tightly. And when he offered solutions, they obeyed without question. Jeremiah's solutions were never simple. He would demand long fasting sessions, night vigils, and costly sacrifices in the form of money. He convinced the people that his prayers required special oils, perfumes, or garments that could only be obtained through him. Of course, the prices were exorbitant, but who would argue with a man who claimed to see the spirit world? Among those most affected were the women. Many of them were desperate for children, desperate for marriage, desperate for deliverance from poverty. Jeremiah saw their desperation and exploited it ruthlessly. He would invite some of them privately, telling them that their case was special. He would whisper that he had seen in the spirit that their wombs were locked by demonic chains, and the only way to break those chains was through a prophetic cleansing. This cleansing, he claimed, required intimacy, a union that transferred his so-called anointing into them. At first, the women were shocked. But Jeremiah had already sown seeds of fear so deeply in their hearts that many could not resist. He told them that refusal would mean death or eternal barrenness. Trembling, they agreed, believing they were obeying a divine instruction. And so, one after another, he defiled them, all the while wearing the cloak of holiness before the public eye. News of miracles began to spread. fabricated testimonies that Jeremiah encouraged. Some women claimed they had conceived after his prayers. Others said their businesses had flourished. Many of these testimonies were exaggerated or outright lies, but they strengthened his grip on the congregation. People began to call him Man of Fire, and he basked in the title, growing bolder in his deception. Yet behind the facade there was ruin. Some women who fell into his trap became depressed and broken, unable to share their shame. Others lost their marriages when their husbands discovered suspicious behavior. But Jeremiah silenced them with threats. He warned them that if they dared to speak, curses would follow them, and their children would die mysteriously. Fear sealed their lips. Still, God is not mocked. A time came when Jeremiah's hidden works began to unravel. But the eyes of the Lord see what man cannot see. Though Jeremiah hid his sins under the veil of spirituality, the cries of the broken women reached heaven. For every tear shed in silence, for every night a woman lay awake in guilt and fear, God recorded it. And slowly the cracks in Jeremiah's fortress began to appear. Among his members was a young woman named Esther. She was 25, beautiful, and devoted to the things of God. She came to Jeremiah's church after hearing testimonies of barren women who supposedly conceived through his prayers. Esther had struggled with fibroid for years and feared she might never bear a child. Jeremiah saw her weakness and quickly marked her as prey. One evening after service he called her aside. His voice lowered into a whisper as he said, "My daughter, the Lord has revealed something urgent to me about your destiny. There are chains around your womb, placed there by ancestral spirits. If nothing is done within the next 3 months, you will never carry a child in your life. But God has chosen to deliver you through me." Esther trembled. Tears welled in her eyes as she asked what she must do. Jeremiah leaned closer and said, "There is a special prophetic cleansing that requires you to yield yourself as a vessel. The Spirit of God will flow through me into you and the chains will break. It may look like intimacy, but it is divine, it is not carnal." Esther recoiled in shock. But Jeremiah was persuasive. He quoted twisted scriptures, saying that Elisha laid on the dead child to bring life, and that Paul declared all things are lawful for the chosen. He warned her that disobedience would mean remaining barren forever. 4 days Esther wrestled within herself, but the thought of permanent childlessness weakened her resistance. She gave in, hoping against hope that it was truly of God. Afterward she was filled with guilt and shame. But Jeremiah told her sternly never to tell anyone, insisting that spiritual things must be kept secret. He even told her to testify in church that she had received her healing, though her condition had not changed. Esther obeyed, but her heart was torn in pieces. She was not alone. Other women carried the same burden, though none spoke to the other. Each believed she was the only one and that her silence kept her safe from curses. Jeremiah's fame spread wider. He began to attract wealthy traders, politicians, and even people from neighboring towns. His church grew in size, and his pockets grew fat with offerings and so-called prophetic seeds. He acquired cars, built a mansion, and traveled abroad. The people, blinded by fear and false miracles, celebrated him as a chosen vessel of God. But one day light pierced the darkness. In the same congregation was an elderly widow named Mama Grace. She had walked with God for many years and had a spirit of discernment. Though she never accused Jeremiah openly, she often prayed quietly, asking God to expose anything hidden in the church. She noticed that many women who claimed to be healed still carried sadness in their eyes. She saw how Jeremiah avoided accountability, never allowing any elders in the church, never submitting to anyone higher than himself. Mama Grace prayed, "Lord, if this man is truly yours, let your glory shine. But if he is false, let your judgment fall, that your children may not perish in ignorance." Her prayer was answered sooner than expected. Esther, the young woman, could no longer bear the weight of her secret. She began to fall into depression. One night, in tears, she confided in her close friend Ruth, who was also a member of the church. At first, Ruth thought Esther was imagining things. But when Esther described Jeremiah's exact words and threats, Ruth's heart shook. Only months earlier, Jeremiah had told Ruth almost the same words about her business challenges, though she had refused his advances. Now she realized Esther's story was true. Ruth encouraged Esther to be brave and speak out. But Esther feared curses. It took weeks of prayer and persuasion before she agreed. Together they approached Mama Grace, pouring out their hearts. Mama Grace wept, held their hands, and reassured them that the God who sees in secret would protect them. She then gathered a few trusted believers and they began to pray earnestly for the exposure of Jeremiah. Soon after, the truth burst forth. One of the women Jeremiah had deceived fell gravely ill. Racked with guilt, she confessed everything to her husband on her deathbed. The man, heartbroken and furious, stormed into the church during a Sunday service, shouting the truth before the entire congregation. At first, people were stunned. Jeremiah tried to laugh it off, accusing the man of lying under the influence of demons. But then, one by one, other women began to break down in tears, confessing what Jeremiah had done to them. The church erupted in chaos. Men shouted. Women wept. Some fell to the ground in shock. Jeremiah's mask was torn off before the very people he had deceived. Fearing for his life, he fled the church compound, but it was too late. The matter reached the authorities and soon Jeremiah was arrested. Investigations uncovered not only sexual exploitation, but also financial fraud and false documents. The once celebrated man of fire was exposed as a wolf in sheep's clothing. The women he had deceived slowly found healing through the support of true ministers who stepped in to guide them back to God. Mama Grace became a pillar of encouragement, reminding them that though a man of God may fail, the God of men never fails. Esther, though scarred by her experience, gradually regained her peace and found strength in testifying to others about the danger of blind trust in so-called prophets. As for Jeremiah, he sat in prison, abandoned by the same people who once hailed him. His wealth crumbled, his fame dissolved, and his name became a warning across the land. Parents warned their daughters about men like him, and churches became more vigilant against deception. And so, the story of Pastor Jeremiah stood as a solemn reminder that not everyone who speaks with a loud voice, not everyone who proclaims miracles, truly carries the Spirit of God. Many are wolves in disguise, preying on fear and desperation. But God, who is faithful, will always bring light to expose darkness, and deliver His people from deceit.
Thank you for watching Tales by Dan Safia.